Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I have Cody Jones. Cody is the owner of Absolute Landscaping, as well as a host of Pure Wisdom Podcast. So, Cody, welcome. How's
Thank
it
you for having
going?
me. I'm
Yeah,
great, man. How are you?
good, good. Glad you could come on. We've been talking about this a little bit. And I just want to kind of hear a bit about your life story as well as any other topics you wanted to discuss, but primarily life story and then business, or you were saying kind of personal development, that kind of thing as well. Usually I start out with where my interviewee is in life today. So, like today, who is Cody today? What are you doing? So you can start kind of with that.
Okay, man. That's such a unique thing to think about. It's such a crazy thing to think about because every once in a while I'll think of where I was at, where I started from, why I started, because that's kind of a frequent question that comes up. But it's like, man, I don't know. I'll be 31 this year. I turned 30 last year, April. I'll be 31. And so I was thinking about that late last year. I was like, I feel like I've made a lot of changes since my early 20s, which is when I started my business. That's always like a big thing for me when I speak is when at 20 years old I started the business that I currently have. So we've been in this thing for a decade.
Okay.
And man, it was like one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life was starting a business. I've learned so much about just from interacting with people, so much about myself. Of course, the first, 5 years or so were really, really kind of tough, man. It was a lot of a huge learning curve, kind of getting into a space I had not really been in. But to answer your question now, where I'm at now, I'm just trying to basically take everything that I've learned over the past decade and continue to apply it and continue to improve on that. Because there was a lot, like I said, there was a lot of lessons, but I'm sure you're well aware, and your listeners are well aware. Anytime you start, or not necessarily a business, like anything that you do, anything like the first couple years there, man, there's those. I guess maybe a good way to look at it is it's kind of a weeding out process. It kind of sees if it's something you really want to do.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, right now I'm just trying to learn more things, take the things I've already learned, kind of improve on those and implement those a little bit more, and just continue to grow, personally and professionally, and with my personal life also.
Okay. And today, are you single? Are you married? What's your relationship like?
I have a girlfriend. I'm not married, but I'm not single, so I do have a girlfriend.
Okay. And yeah, if you could go back in time and kind of explain or give us some insight into who were you when you were a teenager, let's say.
Okay, so teenager, man, even as a teenager, I just had this. I don't know what you would call this sort of not quite. I wouldn't say I was rebellious. I wouldn't say go that far, but it was almost like this, this kind of thing to do my own thing. Not to just follow the crowd, not to kind of do what everybody else was doing. For a while there, as a teenager, I had I guess you could say, an ambition of, pursuing a military career. Found out, I guess, late teens, early 20s that really wasn't something I was going to be a good fit for. It just wasn't. And I think it was because it's kind of hard to answer why that wasn't. I think it was because of the structure, for lack of a better, simple way to say that. But yeah, no, as a teenager, man, I don't know. I always kind of wanted to do my own thing and not really follow any particular, group or culture or anything. I just kind of wanted to do me. I wouldn't say I was rebellious, but I did have this sort of this independent mindset, I guess you could say, is a good way to say it.
Were you kind of keeping to yourself in school, or were you kind of the life of the party with friends in school? What were you like in social circles back then?
I was neither. I would say that I was able to kind of fit into multiple different groups, if you will. I didn't really have a set group that I kind of associated with daily, and I wasn't really, I've never really been a lone person. I kind of like socializing with people. but I've also found it, and this was something that kind of I think benefited me in the business space too, was just being able to develop relationships and rapport with people from different areas, different belief systems, and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, that's something I did notice as a teenager. I didn't really have a certain crowd or whatever that I kind of fit in.
Are you an only child, or do you have brothers and sisters?
So I have brothers and sisters. I have two older sisters that were kind of my mom and dad's marriage, and then my mom and dad divorced, and they had a son each. And so I have two older sisters, and I have two younger brothers, but those brothers aren't brothers, so they're my brothers from separate marriages. So I was the oldest son of both of my parents and their other relationships. But then I was the youngest son of their children, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So you have two stepbrothers,
Half brothers.
or half. Sorry,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. What was it like growing up with the two older sisters?
So really, the youngest older sister is about, I think, maybe 8 or 9 years older than me. So technically, by the time I got into the teenage years, she was kind of already out of the house type thing. So it wasn't like I was the oldest child, but for, half of my childhood, it was kind of like I was the oldest child. But, it was fun. Growing up with sisters are a little bit different than brothers. They both had their kind of unique, I guess, unique characteristics to it.
Yeah. And then kind of going back to school, in middle school or high school, did you play any sports?
I played football up until ninth grade, so that'd have been the first year of high school. Baseball I played until eighth grade, I think it was. But high school I wasn't really into the sports too much. I played a lot of sports as a kid, but high school I just didn't. I just didn't. I was focused on working. I had a full time job. I was working about 35 hours a week as a high school student. So sophomore and, well, I guess it would be junior and senior. So yeah, I played up until ninth grade.
What was your drive to work during high school? Like, what was the reason that you wanted to work rather than play sports or do other activities?
Man, I had a lot going on, and my mom is who I kind of lived with and grew up with primarily, and she had a lot going on. She was kind of absent at that time, so I don't want to say I was forced, because that makes it seem like it's something that it's not. And I also know too that there are other people who had way worse situations than what I had in high school, but it was it was almost as if I was learning that, at some point you have to kind of, you're going to have to kind of pick yourself up and put yourself, out there to where you need to be. And that was kind of one of the lessons that I learned, that I try to capitalize on as we're kind of going through this journey of life.
Hmm. So, did you graduate from school? Did you kind of just jump into your business, or what were you doing right after school?
Yep. So I did graduate, high school diploma. The man probably so I started the business at 20, graduated at 18. For those couple years right there, I don't know, I probably had at least probably 30 jobs. I mean, I've worked restaurants, I've worked warehouses, I've worked manufacturing, and that kind of thing. I only had so I currently own a landscaping company. I only had one landscaping job prior to that, and that was only for, I don't know, a couple months. Not really a very intense thing. But I just had so many jobs, man. So many, and I didn't really know, I guess, maybe what I was doing or where I wanted to go. I learned quickly that was not it. What I was doing was just simply not. There had to be something more. I was supposed to be doing something else.
Hmm. What, did you intentionally kind of go job to job to explore like what's out there, or what was the reason for switching jobs during that period of time?
I guess that's the way you could say it. The way I would word it is I was kind of looking for something that was missing. I knew, like I said, the whatever job I had at the moment, and I had some great jobs. It's nothing against the company, but I had some great jobs, and it was something was missing during those times, and I didn't quite know what it was. I just had this feeling that I'm not supposed to be here doing this. I'm supposed to be doing something else. Something's missing here. So it took me, like I said, 30 jobs or so, kind of bouncing around before I said, look, this isn't going to work for me. And like I said, I started the business at 20, and for the first 5 years or so, it would technically be a primary income, but to me, I saw it as a secondary thing because the business is what I focused on. I would always, I've always said I was a much better employer than I am employee because, I would miss days of work if it meant focusing on the business and making the business grow and that kind of thing. So yeah, man, I knew something had like where I was at wasn't necessarily where I was supposed to be. There had to be something else. Like I was supposed to be doing something else.
So how did you come up with that intuition? How did you like sense that was it? Like whatever you're doing is not the right thing, but you need to do something else.
Well, it was kind of discouraging at first because like I said, I had these good jobs, these decent paying jobs for the industry they were in, and there were people that were working alongside me, and these guys seemed to be very content with the job and the company, and the kind of money they were making and this kind of thing. And I'm like, well, something is clearly not. These guys, I won't say they love coming to work every day, but they like their job. They're fulfilled in their job, and I'm like, I'm over here and I don't feel the things that these guys are feeling. So something's not right here. And so it was kind of discouraging at first, but yeah, it just, people say that if you follow your passion, you follow your purpose, you'll never work a day in your life type thing. I think it's something along those lines, man. It was just something inside of me that said, look, there's got to be a change. Like this just simply isn't it.
Do you feel like by now you found what you're supposed to be doing?
I think looking back now, I think each area of my life, if we want to break life down into, let's just say 2 year spans, I think each one of those sections, what I was doing at the time made sense because it always set up for the next 2 years and the next 2 years and the next, those 2 years when I was, bouncing from job to job to job, it kind of set up for the next two. The next two, the first 2 years of business were very difficult, but that kind of set me up for the next two as far as what I learned and and so it's just this, and this is what I'm trying to say, like the learning from these things and just kind of taking this and applying it it can be a positive snowball effect if we allow it to be, I think.
Hmm. So you think that it's more of a like chunking your life into 2 year increments or whatever increments work for you that kind of works best, at least in your experience.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that I intentionally do it that way, but it just seems like, looking back over it in 2 year increments, it seems like everything at the time makes sense. And like I said, what I'm doing these days, what I have going on these days, I don't see it stopping in the next 2 years or even the next 4 years. But hopefully, the way I see it is hopefully if I do the things right that I'm supposed to do right now, 2 years from now, I'm going to look back and it's going to make sense. 4 years from now, I'm going to look back, it's going to make sense. And hopefully, I will be in, a better place, a more educated place, and that's kind of the goal. But it's like I said, it's taking these lessons and these increments and kind of and continuing to apply them is I think the most important thing.
Okay. What was your decision behind starting your own company? Like, why did you want to start the company instead of continue to find an ideal company to work for?
I could say that I could give a really generic answer and say that I just felt like my time and effort wasn't appreciated. I just felt like, in the corporate world, you're just a number and this kind of thing. This seems to be a generic answer. But it was almost like the freedom of it, the freedom of just the entrepreneurship and what I at the time what I thought it came with and what it meant and that kind of thing. Of course, every entrepreneur knows that you have to work to get to that point. It's crazy, man. We always see the guy on Instagram or whatever, and he's got this successful business and he's got this car or whatever it is. But like, we don't see the, decade or 2 decades before that it takes to make something. So, and that's one thing I have with social media these days. It makes everything seem like it's an overnight thing. And if we have a young person or even a person that's, 30, 40, even more, 50, 60, whatever, if you try something and you're looking at social media and you're saying, man, all these guys are doing this and this is working out for them. I've been doing this, 2 months and it's not working for me. Well, it must not be right. And that's just kind of one of the bones I had to pick with social media. But, Yeah, man, it was like I said, there was that internal feeling of just something more, just supposed to be doing something more, and then it was also the freedom aspect of it too. I can come in, I can do this, I can work hard, and then hopefully build a future for myself, my family, and anybody who is kind of attached to me. And that includes employees. The big thing about entrepreneurship is not even just having a life for yourself. One of the things that I love about doing this, man, is the ability to the people that work. I don't like to say work for me. The people that work with me is being able to offer them something of value. It's not all about me and what my life is going to be. It makes me feel really good to get a big job or get a big contract and being able to offer these guys some, whether it's more pay or benefits or whatever it is. I think if we were to break it down and we were to identify the metrics of success, I think what I can offer the people who are working with me is a big metric for that.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, yeah, it did. So you opened your business kind of wanting the freedom, wanting to do things in your own way that would contribute to the people around you. What did you find out that first year? Like you said, it was like 5 years before things started to turn kind of your way. What did you realize that you didn't think about or you didn't expect in that first year or first 5 years?
Well, I think for any entrepreneur, I think learning how to price their service is a big problem, and that was definitely an issue that I had to learn kind of over time. I think something I didn't really anticipate in the first couple years was interacting with people and kind of overcoming, obstacles and challenges. Which at the time, the biggest obstacle might have been, a flat tire or something, and I couldn't make it to somebody's house to do a job. And I just didn't really anticipate, the pressure of having a list of things to do, and then it's different when you're at a company and then something happens and then you just can't do. But when you're by yourself, I mean, you are the tip of the spear, so to speak, and if you can't make things work, then it's kind of all on you. And so I didn't really anticipate the pressure, I guess you could say.
Hmm. Did you, how quickly did you realize that the freedom you were seeking comes in a different form than maybe what you thought it was?
Yeah, real quick, man. Yeah, it did not take long at all. but but regardless, I knew that I would still rather be doing that than I would, the 40 hours a week thing. I knew that for sure.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, usually same thing for me when I started the business. And you imagine what your lifestyle would be like,
Yep.
especially based on somebody else's Instagram pictures or whatever else. And then you realize, yeah, that's maybe in the future someday, but not in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what other lessons did you pick up from your first 5 years in business?
At the time, I was reading a lot. At the time, I was reading. I've read the who is it, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That was a big one. Kind of interacting with people, just kind of see how to not necessarily even negotiate. I think that came in the next 5 years, but just how to talk to people and how to kind of build relationships, how to show up and how to just introduce yourself basically and just kind of build rapport. That was a big thing is kind of just developing those relationships with people. The scheduling, the time management, which I still don't have that down, man. A decade later, and I'm still working on that one. The Yeah, like I said, the pressure, and something that I remember now that I'm thinking about this. I think about this every once in a while. It's like, and it only makes sense. Like I said, looking back, everything only makes sense. But it's like every single year. So this is the 10th year in business. Specifically February. It was February 2019 or whatever it was. 10 years. No, 14. I'm sorry. Every year has been like, I look back over the first year, like I said, the flat tire situation. I'm like, oh man, like back then I thought that was a huge thing. Then the next year, it was had an issue with the mower. Oh man, and that seemed to be bigger than the flat tire thing. Then the next year, and it's now the things we have going on. It's like, man, I can't even believe I was kind of sweating that stuff. I mean, this is like I won't say an everyday thing, but this is like a 15-minute fix right here. Anyway, so the first 5 years, one of the big lessons was overcoming those obstacles, overcoming those, I won't say adversities, because adversity is a strong word for something that seems so simple, but just at the time it was, in perspective, relative to everything else, it was a big thing to overcome. But it was like building on those, like every single year. I won't say it was more and more, but it was exponential to what was going on around, or it was relative to what was going on around.
What would you tell somebody who's, let's say, just getting out of high school, and they almost have like this anxiety about the future? They're barely handling their day-to-day kind of studying or whatever else, and they're like, how am I going to solve all these future problems that I don't know how to solve my little problems right now? Like, what could you tell somebody like that, having gone through, like you explained, from smaller problems, being able to handle smaller problems, to now being able to handle a lot bigger problems?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I think what I would say is, don't focus on overcoming the problem. Don't focus on just getting through whatever the problem is. Because if you are the person who just gets through the problem, yeah, that's great. You get through the problem's solved. But one thing, is anybody knows about life is that that's not the only problem you're going to have. There's going to be some other thing come up at some point in time. And if you focus on being the person who can handle problems instead of just getting through that specific problems, you'll be prepared for the next problem. Because I think a big thing that we don't realize, and I didn't realize this for the longest time, we talk about self-identity all the time and how we see ourselves and what we think about ourselves and how we interact with the world. But here's the thing. One of the reasons self-identity is so important is because if you don't know who you are when something comes around to challenge you, some sort of adversity, some sort of problem, you're not going to have anything to reference. And if you have a strong sense of identity, if you say, you know what, this situation is not ideal, but I see myself as the kind of person who can handle these situations, then the situation is regardless. It's because you see yourself as the person who can take care of this thing. Versus if you look at the problem, you say, oh man, I got this situation, I'm going to solve it, and after that everything's going to be all smooth and everything's going to be done. Okay, well that might work for you and that might work short term, but all that means is next time something happens, you're going to have to start the whole process over. That's what I'm saying. If you can see yourself as the person who solves problems, because then if you're the person who solves problems and you have a problem come to you, that's who you are. You're able to solve it.
So I find today a lot of, especially young adults or teenagers, they spend so much time on social media, and they see all these success stories, whether they're true success or fake success, whatever it is. They see these other people who became successful at younger and younger and younger age, and they look at themselves and say, well, I didn't really accomplish anything. Or they try to do something, post some pictures or whatever, I didn't get that many likes or whatever, and they get down on themselves. Would you have some kind of advice or something that you would tell them, as far as like whoever these models are or influencers, and whatever the actual life of a regular person, like comparing is not a thing, like, but how do you help them build their own self-esteem up, I guess, is the question.
Yeah. So man, self-esteem is a big one, but first, the comparison thing. People have to understand that, 98% of what goes on social media is a highlight reel. Most people are putting the absolute best parts of their life on social media. It's like we talked about earlier. You don't see all the things that go on behind the scenes. You see the happy marriage, you see the nice sports car, whatever. You don't see the work that goes into that behind the scenes. Another issue I have with that this might work for this person. They're 18, 19, 20 years old, and they whether it's a cryptocurrency thing or a streamer with the video game or whatever it is, they have this very early success in life. Okay, that's their story. Like, that's part of their story. And the thing that I try to tell people is the story that we have for ourselves, who we are, what's part of your story is not going to be part of my story. What's part of, John Doe's story is not going to be your story. It's your story is specific to you, and is specific to your, like, every detail in your life. There might be people who have similar lives to you, but every single detail in your life is your life. You are the only person who is supposed to live your life. I mean, down to every single detail. You are that is your life. And this is what I try to tell people about purpose. If they have an ambition for something, a drive for something, that is not an accident. I mean, yes, everybody would love to have, $1 million in the bank. Everybody would love to have a nice sports car or whatever it is. But these things are given specifically to you. And I think that is a way for the universe, or for God, or for your higher self, whatever it is that people want to label it as. That is a way for this to communicate with you and say, look, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Like, this is a driving factor. Because I think a lot of times we think that, like, a dream or an aspiration is just something that we have, and then at some point we just have to kind of grow up and get real, and do the realistic thing, in quotes. But it's like, okay, but is this an accident? Like, is this something that you live every single day of your life, and you cannot think, like, you think about it every single day? Because if that's the case, I would say that's not that. I would say that's settling. I would say that's settling for something that you think is probable or likely for you. But yeah, to go back to I don't want to get off on a tangent there. To go back to the main point, the comparison on the social media, I think that's dangerous, man, because we don't even know these people, and even if we do, they're probably not putting the bad parts on there. They're putting and that's just how social media is. I mean, and I don't think there's anything wrong with, being proud of yourself and sharing your success, especially if you're trying to inspire people or whatever. But I think we just have to be aware and conscious of the fact that this is a highlight reel. I mean, this is not, this is a highlight reel, and we can't compare ourselves to somebody else's story, because we're not that person. First of all, their story is not ours. And if you really get down to it, if you really get into the details of it, you might not want every single detail of your life, which leads us into the second point, is the self-esteem situation, and kind of building this self-confidence with yourself. Man, the way that I tell people to improve this and to work on this is to keep the promises that you make to yourself. So, for example, this is a really simple example. It's a really easy one for everybody to understand. If you tell yourself that you're going to go to the gym at, 6 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, okay, if you don't follow through with that, like we think that it's okay because it's just us. I don't have a commitment with anybody else. Nobody's meeting me there. I'm just kind of doing this. If I want to take the day off just because I feel like it, that's okay. But the problem with that is, if you do that over a long enough time period, you become the person who you cannot trust yourself. And if you can't trust yourself, when you have these intuitions, when you have this internal calling for something, you're not going to be able to trust that, because you look back over your life and you say, well, man, I can't even keep the promises that I make to myself. So what if I'm wrong? What if this intuition that I have, what if it's not right? Versus if you're the person who keeps those promises to yourself. If you say, I'm going to do this thing regardless of how I feel, if I tell myself I'm going to do it, I'm going to keep the commitment and I'm going to do it. If you do that over a long enough period of time, then you get to the point where you have a very deep question, and you ask yourself, you say, well, I have this drive or this ambition to do something. Okay, I'm not sure 100% that it's going to succeed, but looking back over my life, I've been able to trust myself up to this point. I've built confidence with myself up to this point, and I think this is going to be the best decision for me to take. So I'm really going to try this. And that's really, man, it sounds so simple. I mean, there's people, when we think about self-confidence, we think about, do we brush our hair? Do we brush our teeth? How are we groomed? And that kind of thing, man. But it's like, self-confidence is internal, and it comes from being able to trust yourself. And the only way you can trust yourself is to show yourself, just like with anybody else. you might trust people to a certain extent without knowing them, but the more you interact with a person and have a relationship with them, and the more that you can see that you can depend on them, it's the same thing for yourself. If you can't depend on yourself, I mean, you're not going to trust yourself. You're not going to have self-confidence.
How much of that has to do with your identity? And when it comes to identity, you mentioned it earlier. How did you personally figure out what your identity is?
You know, for me, part of seeing my own self identity was, like I said, it goes back to the high school thing. Not really fitting in with a certain crowd or whatever. For me, it's a really unique thing, man, because I'm not the kind of guy to get involved in sports. I don't really follow sports. I'm not really a guy that, gets into the cars or, whatever. A lot of these things that the guys were doing around me at that time, I just wasn't into those things. And I think it's being able to step sort of out of that circle of your peers and say, look, these things don't interest me. This is what interests me. And so this is what I'm going to focus my time on. And it sounds like when you do that, you're going to be kind of alone. But what you realize is that there are other people who see things the way that you do. If you're into fitness, or if you're into, reading or whatever it is, there are other people. Like, basically what I'm trying to say is there's other circles you can step into that don't necessarily have to be, I guess, the mainstream thing. So yeah, I've always said about identity, I've always said some of the things that at the time they happened to me, I thought they were bad things. Those have been some of the best things that's ever happened to me, because they kind of did show me who I was. When I was put in these situations of pressure or these situations of grief or pain or whatever it was, it showed me how I can react, and it almost showed myself to myself. And I'm not telling anybody to go out and do anything this painful or hurtful, but what I'm saying is, if you can put yourself in situations to overcome something. What example? A big example I use for this is the gym, because it's such a simple example. It's so easy for a lot of people to do this. You put yourself in that situation. You overcome this thing, you proved yourself to yourself. And then a big thing that you see, like with the gym, is a lot of people, when they start a fitness routine, if they drink alcohol, or I'm not saying there's anything wrong with alcohol, but if they drink alcohol, or if they go out to bars or clubs or smoke cigarettes or whatever it is, a lot of times you'll see a person starts a fitness plan, and then they'll stop the cigarettes. They'll stop, or at least cut back on the alcohol. And one thing about that is, it's easy for us to say, like, okay, we can filter out what we want to eat if we start, trying to lose weight or whatever. That's an easy one. But what we don't see, and this is one of the reasons that I say fitness is like a cornerstone to your life, but what we don't see is how it filters everything else. It filters the environment that you're in a lot of times. And once you start filtering what you eat, the environment that you're in, then you start to filter, if you haven't already, the information that's processed in your mind. The negativity that seems to be just I mean, we're just flooded with. You get on social media right now. Not even social media. I don't know what email service you use. I use Yahoo. Okay, so that means if I go on a PC, every time I get on Yahoo, there is a headline, some sort of news headline. I go to check my email. There's a news headline about a war and like all this death and stuff. I mean, we're just like inundated with this negativity. And if you get to a point where you filter out what you eat, where you're at, the environment you're with, the people that are around you, by extension, you're going to filter out the what your mind consumes, like what the information that goes into your mind, the complaining and the negative self-talk and the self-doubt that just people, this just like this cycle that a lot of people are caught in. I don't know if that answered your question about the, I don't want to go too far off the topic here.
Yeah, I mean, what I picked up is like identity was kind of based on interest or what interested you. That's where you pulled your identity from.
Well, it was that, but it was also being able to just kind of be myself and feel like I didn't have to fit in, because I don't know how else to say it other than because I am the person that I am. I think not being able to, which is really, it's very difficult for a teenager, and I understand that. It's very difficult for a teenager to kind of be their own person and not go along with their peers. I do understand that. But I think that once you do that, and once you kind of get the ball rolling on that, then you become I think it's easy for you to become a leader because you kind of stand in your own space. You kind of, you're not necessarily and I guess this is one thing that kind of helped me out too, because I think from what I've been told, and this is not a trait somebody can label themselves as, but what I've been told is that I have these leadership qualities, these things. And I guess it's got to be something to do with the independence. I don't know. Cause I'm not really like I said, I'm not really a person who kind of goes along with the crowd, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. So kind of going back to your high school or right after high school, you mentioned you started reading books like on self-improvement and so on. Did
Yep.
you have a mentor? Did you have some kind of guidance from somebody, like as far as how to improve yourself? Like, how did you get to that point?
I wouldn't say I had what would you call it?
A
I
mentor?
wouldn't say I wouldn't say I had a mentor. No, I would say that a lot of what I did was, early on is started listening to other podcasts, listening to YouTube videos, listening to how other people made these changes. And I think just kind of listening to that, man, just kind of listening to other people's conversation and kind of being able to resonate. Like if I heard something that resonated with me and I could kind of relate to it a little bit, that made a huge difference. Just and not even that I was like taught to these people personally or anything. I was able to hear kind of what they were saying, and that's something else I try to explain to a lot of people too. Is like we have all this information at our fingertips. If we really wanted to, we could learn these things. We could hear other people's story. We could kind of get out there in the space and see what's really going on. But that was something that really helped me was the YouTube videos and the podcast. On top of the books, I tried to read as many books as possible. Sometimes I listen to a book, but that's not the same as reading.
But even having the desire to read, I mean, that kind of comes from wanting to improve. If you're reading like self-improvement books and so on.
Yep.
But so where did that kind of motive come from for you?
I think that was about the time, 4 or 5 years ish in business. That was about the time when I said, okay, I'm at a place where I can continue to try to push this thing, or I can kind of stop or whatever and do something else, or just kind of hang out where I'm at. But I knew that if I was going to continue and if I wanted to grow, I was going to have to grow myself. If I wanted to grow professionally, in my intimate life, my dating life, or whatever it was, I was going to have to grow personally, internally. I saw that. I guess I was maybe 24, 25 at that point. I had that realization, I guess, relatively young, but I'm very thankful for it because I knew that I had to make, if I wanted to change my life, I had to change myself.
Mm-hmm. Would you call yourself curious, or were you always curious, or just curious kind of from that point forward as far as things around you?
I don't think I was as curious before that. I think, like I said, before that, the main motive was just kind of, the freedom and that kind of thing. I wish I would have been curious before that. I wish I would have been curious from day one, because, that was another 5 years there that we could have been using in the right direction. But no, it was definitely after that point, man, because I said, I'm like, you have a limit for yourself if you can't grow. If you can't grow internally or personally, it's like a limit. And so I knew that I was going to have to kind of break down those barriers and kind of go into who I was, and kind of not necessarily fix myself, because that implies that something was wrong, but just sort of learn. I guess learn is the best way to put it. Learn and implement and grow. And so, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do now. It's like I said, it's a cycle that repeats itself. Well, I'll say this, for me, I hope that it's a cycle that repeats itself, because that means I'll continue to kind of progress as far as my personal growth. And hopefully, if I'm doing the same thing, and if everybody else is listening to this, if they try this, if we're doing the right thing, everybody that is connected to us should benefit. That's family, that's friends, that's employees, neighbors, whatever it is. I mean, I know that these days, I look back on, just my interactions with people, and like if a simple thing is if like somebody cuts you off in traffic, we all have that desire to just kind of be heated about that. But it's like sometimes, man, you can just look back and say, you know what, maybe a year ago or so, I would have reacted differently than I am now. And just now I'm more, insert whatever XYZ, I'm more calm or whatever. But, yeah.
Yeah. So that was your first 5 years in business. From that point to now, what did you change about how you operate within and without, inside and outside of the business?
Yeah, man, those first 5 years, the first 5 years was a lot. I did, I don't know, probably the first 3 or 4, I did a lot by myself. I don't think I even hired somebody until year 5 or so, but, around the 5th year, so I would have been 25, was a big turning point for my life anyways, because my mom passed away when I was 25. And so that was and like I said, her relationship with me, I had a very, I got something going on here. You see this?
No.
We had a really close relationship, man. And she had a sudden death. And it was a tragic thing. And so that was a big turning point for me. And I think what it was I realized that this sounds sort of, I hope it doesn't sound as negative as I think it sounds, but it made me realize that there's nobody like if you want to improve yourself, if you want to do something for yourself, you have to be the one to do it. And I think a lot of times what I think a big issue of today is that a lot of people expect people to do things for them. They expect a person to come, whether it's a new leader for a company or a new president or, a new whatever. It's like we put these things into the hands of other people. And what that does, obviously, is it takes the power away for us to make our own changes. Now, I guess the comforting part of that is, well, if it doesn't work out, there's somebody to blame. But it's also, too, it keeps you in the same spot that you're currently in. And so yeah, that after year 5 or so was like, I was like, all right, my mom, like I said, my mom was gone. She wasn't here anymore. And I was like, okay, this was something that was unexpected. It was tragic. My entire family was hurt, obviously, because of it. And I was like, from this point on, I have a choice. I can continue to improve and I can continue to grow and I can hopefully one day be where I want to be, or I can use this as an excuse and just be pissed off at the world and be resentful and just, nobody would blame me for giving up type thing. This victim mentality that it just seems so easy to form. But no, I don't know. It was, I think one of the things, going back to the identity thing, one of the things that I learned about myself during that time was, overcoming things like that, because I found out that, like, she died in June. September I was in real estate school obtaining a real estate license. October of that same year I was a licensed agent. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the way I kind of got through these things and got over these things was to put my time into something that I thought was productive, which at the time it seemed like a productive thing, but it was kind of like I don't want to say an excuse. It was kind of like a way to just handle it, basically. But what I realized from that was, when there are issues like that, when there's something this sort of not comfortable or something that needs to be taken care of, I see myself as the person that steps into it, that steps mm-hmm. into that thing. And so I want to let you speak, because I feel like you want to go somewhere from that. I don't want to look, man. When I talk, I get off on tangents. Like, I get excited about this stuff, and I'll just go everywhere. So you'll have to kind of direct me where you want the conversation to go.
No, the question was more around your next 5 years and how, like, what did you learn from that? What changes did you make in your life to get you to where you are today?
It was definitely, after that point, it was definitely more of a long-term thinking.
Okay.
Because like I said, before that, it was just about, I was in my early 20s and didn't want to have a boss and that kind of thing. But after that point, it was like, all right, let's make this a sustainable thing. Let's make this something that's going to be around for a while, that we can build on. And in order to do that, we're going to have to start thinking long-term, not what's going on this week or this month, but what are we doing next month? Where are we going to be at 6 months from now? What do we need to do now to be ready for this time next year? And that was a big thing, kind of thinking, and even like I'll tell people all the time, man, I'm thinking I'm like 6 months ahead. I'm thinking 6 months ahead where we're going to be at, what we need to do. Because in my situation, I didn't really have anybody as far as like funding goes. I didn't have anybody to like sign off on a loan for me. So I was always thinking like, man, what if I need to get a piece of equipment like 6 months from now? Where's my credit going to be? Okay, well, that means I got to start doing this now if it needs to be where it needs to be at 6 months from now. And so the around 5-6 years, just that was when it was like, okay, we need to start thinking long term. We need to make this something that we can actually get a foundation on, so that we can, grow, build and grow from that.
Mm-hmm. And during that time, again, the next 5 years, what were some biggest challenges that you had to overcome, and how did you overcome them?
So there was one actually recently, because I guess this is still technically the next 5 years, even though this is year 10. But you know, just the thing about the truck excuse me, the truck situation, trucks breaking down, and people not being reliable here and there, and just things kind of falling apart like that. But one thing and this was kind of recent. Let me see, around year 7-ish, we picked up a pretty big client, and this client it became like 60% of our revenue. I mean, huge client for us, big deal. And so we were there. 2020 was actually the first year that we started working with these guys. And so we're in there, man, and it was 2020, and it was already hard to find people because nobody wanted to work because there was COVID going around, and all this kind of stuff was going on. So it was already hard to find people to work. And it's already hard to find people I'm sure you know this, it's already hard to find people in a trades industry anyways, because it's hard work. And so, we're in there, man. We show up the first year and everything is great. Everything works out. We show up the second year, everything works out. Third year, which would have been last year, sometime around late 2021, this company had a shift in ownership. So, another company came in, bought them out, whatever. Last year, at some point, they had a new CEO come in, and there was they wanted to make changes to the property, basically. So we had the property, I think it was like 3 years. The people before us had it 15 years or 12 years. It was 15 total between the two of us. And the property, it looked the exact same, for the 15 years. And so anyway, new leadership comes in where they want to make changes. And so I never met these people, didn't know what was going on, received a letter in the mail that our services were going to be terminated. And we're like, oh man, I mean, everything was by the book, everything was with the exact way it was supposed to be as far as the notice and all that kind of stuff goes. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. Cause if you talk to anybody on the property, like everybody was very pleased with what we were doing. And, so this just kind of came out of nowhere, and I don't want to say that we were unjustly fired, because that makes it seem like I'm a victim, and that makes it seem like something that is happening to us. And I say us, meaning me and the people that work with me. But it's like we didn't really do anything wrong as far as, like I said, it looked great. Everything was going up. Everything was the way it was supposed to be. My understanding is they wanted some things done, and I guess they thought that we were not equipped or whatever to do those things. And so, like I said, this was like 60% of the revenue. Excuse me. And so this happens, man. And I'm like, okay, we got a couple months here to finish this thing out. I said, I can do two things right here. Same thing with my mom's situation. I said, I can take this and I can form an identity about it. I can become resentful, and I can be pissed off at everybody, and I can say, oh, woe is me. This wasn't my fault. We didn't do anything to deserve this. Or I can step into this. and I can push back on this, and I can fight back, basically.
Mm-hmm.
This was, I think this was September last year, September 2023. For 3 months straight, I was knocking on doors. And I mean, just to give everybody an idea, it is a landscaping company, but our main focus is commercial. So when I say knocking on doors, I was going to businesses, apartment complexes, this kind of thing. Dude, I probably got, I don't know, I probably had 50 plus business cards from people that I spoke to. And that was only the people that might be interested. This maybe. I don't even know how many people I talked to that was, no, we have someone, we're satisfied, thank you, whatever. I don't even know how many people those were. But I had 50 business cards that were a maybe. It's crazy, man, because I was doing this. I was actually in a neighborhood, and I was looking for the HOA president or whoever, and so I just knocked on a random door, and when I knocked on the door, I heard two dogs inside barking, and two cars in the driveway, and nice neighborhood and everything. Heard two dogs barking. Well, all of a sudden the barking stopped, and the dogs came around the side of the house. One was like a border collie, real playful. I'm sorry, but I got this cough going on right here. So one was like a border collie, really playful looking dog, but the other one had like a very, I don't know what kind of dog it was, like maybe a boxer or something like that. Very, very square looking face, Mm-hmm. And it was clear that I was not welcome at the property. So I don't know if you ever know this or not, but if you ever feel like you're about to be attacked by a dog, they say don't turn your back. Just maintain eye contact and stay like straight on. I didn't know that, so I kind of turned like my back as I was walking back to the truck, and he tried to jump on me. So long story short, I was almost attacked by two dogs because of this. Anyways, 50 plus business cards that were just a maybe. But that grinding, that work gave us one yes, which was all we needed to turn things around. Mm-hmm. And it was because of that it's not an ambition, man. It's and it doesn't really feel right to say relentlessness, but it's that desire to push back and to lean into the discomfort. Because there were two options. There were to sit there and let it happen, or to go out and make a change. And it took, I think I even talked to you the first time we talked about doing this podcast. I was saying, I'm kind of in the middle of a big negotiation right here, big, whatever. And so that's why I couldn't do this at the time, but we ended up getting something that really helped us out. And, we wouldn't have done it had I not leaned into it and just, faced it head on. And that's one of the most valuable lessons, man, that I've had, especially in the last 10 years, is just because you can be the person who leans back, and you can be the person who lets life happen to you, or you can be the person who makes life happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a great lesson. Like, you can't just give up and be like, well, this happened to me and I can't do anything about it. It's like, no, you can't do anything about them backing out of the contract, but you can do something about picking up other contracts like you did. Yeah.
Yep. And see, that was another thing too, man, like that push, like we needed that, it was needed.
Yeah, a lot of times we do get complacent. We get to a certain level and we're like, we're comfortable and we're okay. And until something happens to us, we're not really doing much about it. So yeah, sometimes the growth comes from somebody else pushing us to grow.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're kind of on this personal growth journey. What is that? Like, describe it or give a little bit more details around what you're trying to do with that.
Man, there's so many different ways that comes into play here. For me, a big thing, with like I said, with the business and stuff, but to me, a big thing these days is fitness and physical health. That seems to be where I put a lot of my energy and time and a lot of the effort that I'm putting in. Even with my intimate relationship these days, like I've noticed things that I've tried to work on in the past couple of years and how they're different now. And, and just how that the whole dating life itself is different now. But the fitness part, man, I've been in the gym. I think I've been in the gym 4 years now. But something that I've started recently was MMA training. And man, that is a whole nother, that's a whole nother ball game, man. First of all, it's a skill, but second of all, it's a very new, uncomfortable environment, and it's like I said, it's a whole different thing than just a fitness, just your average fitness. But that's one of the things that I love about it is the ability to get in there and overcome that discomfort. Something else that I'm doing these days too is I don't know if you've seen this online or social media or whatever, but is the cold plunging. It's a tank basically, and it's the water's chilled. You chill it to whatever with ice, and that has been a very big game changer for me.
And what makes it a big thing for you? Like, what is it? Just putting yourself in a uncomfortable situation? Is that kind of has a positive effect on other things in your life?
For sure, yeah. Because when you get in that thing, and it's like I usually do it 30 minutes after I wake up. So you get in there, and it's like 43-degree water. You get in that thing, man. It's like 30 minutes after you wake up. I usually see the sun come up as I'm doing this thing. And there's a lot of different benefits to doing this, but the main thing of how it helps me with other things is first of all, it's a battle to overcome first thing in the morning. So you're starting your day off by overcoming a battle. Second thing, like we talked about earlier, keeping that promise that I make to myself, telling myself that I'm going to do this 4 or 5 days a week, whatever it is. And like, that thing never gets easier. Like I actually enjoy going to the gym. It's something like a lot of people, they dread going to the gym because it's whatever, it's hard or whatever. But like I actually enjoy going to the gym. MMA training I enjoy, even though it's an uncomfortable spot for me initially. That cold plunge never gets easier, man. I mean, that thing sucks. Like you get in there and it's like, but it's getting in there when you don't want. And this is the same thing with everything, business, fitness, whatever. The days that you don't want to do it, the times that you don't want to do it, when you don't want to do it, and you do it anyway, those are the most important times. Because like we talked about earlier with self-confidence, you're proving yourself to yourself. You're keeping the challenge, the promises that you make to yourself, and you're overcoming these challenges. And when you start your day off with it, it's like, well, I don't know a good way to phrase this because I don't want to say you start your day off with a challenge and that makes the rest of the challenges easier. But it's like, if you overcome your own self, if you overcome that voice that's inside your head that says, we don't want to do this today, let's take a day off. If you overcome that, what really can hurt you? I think there's an African proverb that says, when there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's you overcome your own inner voice that doesn't want you to do this thing. It's like, okay, what else is there really? I mean, if you can't hurt yourself, what else is there?
Yeah. I mean, if you overcome that first challenge and that's your first win of the day, so you're starting with a win.
Yep. For sure.
So how are you like shaping that personal improvement? Is it just kind of about improving yourself? Are you expanding it out to other people?
Yeah. So, one of the things I'm trying to do, like with my podcast, is help people with these, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, the cold plunge. Cold plunge is kind of like that's like an extreme thing, man. I would not recommend anybody start a physical fitness journey with a cold plunge, but yeah, I mean, I try to help other people in whatever. So to me, it's a cold plunge. To somebody else, it might be the gym. To somebody else, it might be, the hour that they need to work on their business, the extra hour or whatever it is. Everybody has this thing that I think if they do, that it can improve themselves in more ways than one. I mean, fitness obviously has a lot of different benefits, but if you if you do these things, it's not just the physical benefit that you're getting. You're also getting the mental battle, like you said, the mental battle. So yeah, what I'm trying to do with my podcast, and this is why I'm talking to people who are in this fitness space, who are in the business space, who are kind of doing these things, because I hope that people can pick up on these conversations and, use these, I guess, lessons basically in whatever area it is for them in their life, whatever their thing is in life.
Mm-hmm. What other kind of personal development are you engaged in, basically? Like, what other things are you doing to improve your life?
Yeah, so these days I'm doing something that I really haven't done a lot in the past, which is journaling. Try to journal at least once or twice a week. And that helps me stay very self-reflective, just kind of looking over the past week and just kind of writing down some thoughts and reactions and what I think and, what I think about now, what I think about for the future and that kind of thing. Journaling has been a very beneficial way to really organize thoughts. It's you're kind of just putting your thoughts for me, I use a note in my phone. I'm just kind of writing on and you can do this anywhere. If you have your phone with you can just kind of jot down whatever, but just being able to self-reflect, man. And, and I mean, the good thing about journaling is, especially if it's on your phone or something like that, you can look back a couple weeks, couple months and see, how you were thinking then versus how you're thinking now and just see how things change. I think any way that you can judge your improvements or change, I guess, basically, any way that you can do that, I would recommend doing that. A good way is like, I think with business or career or something, it's easy because you can look at, something like a tax return, or you could look at your client list or whatever it is. But like with fitness, man, I really recommend that people do like a before and after picture or, something like that.
Mm-hmm. What would you say that drives you? Like, have you found your deep why that drives you?
I've actually never been asked this question. I actually never even thought about it, really. I think there's a couple different things that play into this answer. I don't really want to live my entire life, however long that happens to be, and look back and question, what if? And I don't want to take like all the things that I've learned in life and not be able to share those or spread those or help other people who are in different situations. Because I remember back in some parts of my life, man, I didn't really need, like all I really needed was somebody to say, hey, I understand what you're going through. I understand how you feel. I've been there. I mean, that can make a world of difference when you're in a situation when you feel like you're the only person and nobody knows what you're going through and nobody knows like how to, nobody's ever been here before and something must be wrong with you because it's only happening to you. But it's like, I think it's that I just want to see, like, I just have a potential vision for myself and I want to see that vision. I want to see everybody connected to me benefit. I want to see myself improve. I want to see myself benefit. And I don't want, this is not a driving factor, but this is a factor. I do not want to get to, the last year of my life. If hopefully I'll be fortunate enough to be, at an age where I feel like I've accomplished a lot of things, but I don't want to get to that point and say, what if? I don't want to look back and say what if, because like I said earlier, going back to the starting the business thing, we were talking about that 5-year mark. If I would have had the same mindset at 20 than I had at 25, that's 5 years. That's 5 years ahead, man. But like I said, I didn't really have anyone to tell me like, hey, I understand. This is what I think. Whatever. I kind of had to the mindset that I was given. I guess you could say given because I do feel like it was a gift. It was something I kind of had to see certain things of life in order to see things that way. I mean, that's the only way I know how to explain mindset is you have to. Mindset's a big one. I could talk a lot about mindset. The driving factor is that I don't want to look back and see where I could have been or what people could have been around me, and I don't want to interact with somebody that I talk to every day or a couple times a week or whatever it is, and know that that person's life wasn't better because they knew me. And I don't want somebody to feel how I've felt at certain points in my life, whereas as far as, they're lost, they don't know who to talk to. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that I'm the person to talk to, but I hope what I can do is attract someone that can help someone. Maybe I have a very small area of focus that I can help people in that area. And if I can't help somebody, maybe I know somebody. Maybe I know you and you can help somebody. So it's just kind of this never. I think Tony Robbins says constant and never ending improvement. It's just this constant. This just need to improve, really.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned given a couple of times, like the mindset is given and the drive for something is given, or like your identity. Elaborate a little bit more on kind of your belief, like given by whom, given how.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Now, when we say given, that might not be the right terminology because that implies that if somebody doesn't have the mindset, that they can't have it. But at the same time, when we say given, I believe I believe in God. I believe there's a God that created, all this that's around us. But I also think that we have free will. And I think that when things happen or when things don't happen, we have the ability to determine how we see those things. For example, very simple example. We're getting up in the morning, we're going, whatever, before we start our day, we spill our coffee. Now we have to make a whole new pot, whatever. Okay, well, that 5 minutes that it takes could have saved us from an intersection that somebody blew a red light or something. And so it's like the way we see what happens to us, I think is our responsibility. I say all the time that where you were born and how you were born and to the parents you were born, it's not your fault. But where you go from there is your responsibility. And I understand that people have different starting points. I understand that some people were born to completely different people in different parts of the world, and some people are more fortunate as far as who they were born to and where. But I don't think that's an excuse. I think where you go from there is your responsibility. And I think the way you see things, the way you interpret what these things mean, I think that's your responsibility. I think that's something that we can all do. I know I'm saying given as if it's some sort of gift, but this is something that everybody can do. I mean, you can change the way you see things. You can give whatever it is that is happening to you. You can give that a meaning, and it doesn't have to be a negative meaning. It can be something like, for example, we lost this contract. Okay, what does that mean to me? Does that mean that I'm a bad person, that I'm not doing the right thing, that I'm just unlucky? No, it means that I have to go out and I have to work for more things, and I have to fight for more things, and this is what I have to do. But I think one of the biggest things, man, is that we can choose how we see things and where we go from the things that happen to us. And I think one of the things that perpetuates itself is the mentality that things happen to us rather than us making the things happen. Because if everything happens to you, dude, you're just going to be powerless. Like you can't make changes. You can't do anything. If you have a mentality that says these things happen to me and there's nothing you can do about it, there's nothing you can do to change it, I can't imagine like how daunting that is for a person to live that way, because it's like it's like everything is out of your control, which is absolutely not true. Yeah, there's things that happen that are outside of your control, but like what you do to respond to that is 100% your responsibility.
Yeah. What if a person kind of puts more weight on what they don't control versus what they control? Like as an example, they were born, you mentioned, to a certain family in a certain country, and they're like, well, wouldn't it be nicer if I was born to these rich people where I would have all these opportunities and I could do this and I can become all this stuff, but I'm born to, this middle class or poor family or whatever. Like that wasn't my fault, and now I'm stuck here. I wish I was there.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point, man, because that's 100% true. And I mean, here's the thing, you know, this is the thing about excuses. You can tell people your excuse, and nobody will blame you. Like they'll most people will empathize with you. They'll agree with you. Excuses can be the reason that your story doesn't work, or it can be part of the reason why your story did work. So this person might say that, well, they weren't born to, wealthy people in this part of the world. Okay, that's right. That's 100% true. But where you are right now, if you're born to somebody in another area, another culture, who's not as wealthy, whatever it is, you have something that you wouldn't have if you were hypothetically born to somebody else. So now you have an opportunity to get out of this and grow and learn from this. I'm not saying if you were born into a wealthy family or to a specific part of the world that you don't have these options, but you have it in a different way than somebody who doesn't. So it's hard to look at this as an advantage. But if you are able to learn these things, and whether you teach yourself or you teach others teach you, or you pick up a book and read it, whatever it is, it's hard to see this as an advantage. But if you overcome that and you get through that, that is a lesson that probably you wouldn't have had if you were born to another person in another part of the world. And so this is another reason that I talk about this victim mentality, man, because if we always look at things as everything happens to us and everything's everybody else's fault, and the world must not like me because this is hard. Like this is a gift. If you look at it as a gift, this is a gift. This is an opportunity for you to grow through these things. And then once you get out of the other end of that, you would be a completely different person than you would if you didn't have to go through these things at all. I mean, I know it sounds so simple and it sounds maybe oversimplified, but it really is as simple as that. Now, getting through that is easier said than done, but this is the power of social media. This is the power of the podcast, the YouTube, and all this other stuff. Like, you can find somebody who has been in a similar situation to you that can tell you or share how they've done it. I'm saying if you're born in this culture to parent, into poverty or whatever it is, you're probably not going to want to take advice from the person who wasn't born into that, but there is somebody who's been in that similar situation who has made something similar to what you want to work, and you can learn from that person. But I mean, this is what I was saying earlier, like all the bad things that have ever happened to me, I'm grateful for that, because had I not went through those things, all these lessons we've taught, probably 90% of the lessons we've talked about so far on this podcast, I don't even know if I would know had I not went through those things.
What is your thought on people? Can people change? Especially as it comes to mindset, because it seems like no matter what you tell certain people, they'll just continue to play that victim role until, I don't know, something happens to them that's traumatic, where they have to change their mind, or they just don't change it. Like, do you believe people can change in that sense? And if so, how can they change?
Yeah, I think they can 100% change. I think the problem about the victim mentality, from what I've seen is the problem, and I don't even know if people are aware of this, but it perpetuates itself. So if you're constantly blaming other people or other things, people pick up on that energy, and they pick up on the complaining and the nagging and that kind of thing, and it changes the way people act when they're around you. It changes the way people perceive you. And so example, if you're a person who has a victim mentality and everything happens to you, and you go interact with somebody, if that person kind of just senses something's off around you, or if they sense you have an angle about something or whatever it is, they're gonna pick up on that energy, and that's gonna affect how they treat you. And then what that's gonna do is enforce how you already feel about yourself. You're like, oh, see, I knew I wasn't, nobody liked me, or I couldn't get along with you, or whatever it is. And so that it perpetuates itself, man. And I think what a person has to do in that situation is realize that if somebody does something, if you're out in public and if somebody makes a comment to you or cuts you off in traffic or whatever, like these things don't have probably these things do not have anything to do with you. Like everybody's in their own head. They're rushing to their next appointment. They're trying to go pick up the kids. They got a bill that needs to be paid. Like a lot of times these things do not even have anything to do with you. But if you see that and you internalize it and it reinforces what you already believe that's already false about yourself, that's a downhill spiral for you. It's just a snowball effect that just keeps feeding itself because of the things that you think other people think about you. So I think the thing that people have to do to realize is that the way they think other people think about them is really the way they feel about themselves, because unless they're projecting this mentality onto somebody else. And a good example of that is like, for me, man, it's in the employment space and working with employees and that kind of thing is accountability. If something happens and if somebody passes blame, that really irritates me, because it's like the whole reason for asking this is to know what the problem was and how it happened, and maybe to not have it happen again. But if we can't take accountability for where we're at and what happened, you can't solve problems. Well, you can solve problems. You can't prevent problems from happening in the future if we're just going to repeat the same thing. So it's like, to answer your question, I think they need to understand that like this victim mentality perpetuates itself. The way they think about themselves, they're going to continue to think that, and it's going to affect everything that they see, every single interaction they have with people, every quote unquote negative comment somebody makes, everything is going to reinforce. And I don't know exactly down to the detail how to step out of that, but we need to be aware of the fact that what we're listening to, what we're hearing, what we think we feel about ourselves is really a reflection of how we feel. It's got nothing to do with what these other people feel.
And I think what I've seen in some people is there's like two type of victim mentalities. One is where people will blame somebody else. Mm-hmm. And then the second type is where they blame themselves for everything. It's like, well, I'm just not good at this. I'm not good at anything. I'm not, they kind of demean themselves, lower their self-esteem. What would you say to that second category of people? Maybe they're not blaming other people, but they're still blaming. They're blaming themselves. They're not taking accountability. They just give themselves an excuse of like, well, I can't change that. I can't do anything about that. I can't do anything.
Yeah, I think that becomes a completely different conversation, man, because if they're blaming internally like that, there could be a couple different reasons for that. Maybe it's a self-belief. Maybe it's a core belief issue. Or it could be that they're trying to give themselves an excuse for not trying whatever this thing is. For example, I don't know. Like I said earlier, I'm not a sports guy. I don't get into sports. But if a person really wants to be a basketball player, and they say, "Oh man, I'm just not tall enough to be a basketball player. Maybe I just can't do it." Well, that's an excuse. That's a loophole that you're giving yourself. You're giving yourself an easy way out. You're giving yourself something that you can't change that's supposed to make you feel better about not believing that you can do this thing. And this excuse that we give ourselves, this is not just with the victim mentality thing. We see this a lot of times. I think entrepreneurs and busy, successful, professional people see this a lot, because it's like being busy versus being productive. The thing that we're doing, are we being busy or productive? Because if we're being busy, maybe we're giving ourselves an excuse of why we can't be productive. Are we doing the busy task to keep us away from the productive task that's really going to be annoying, but it really needs to be done, but we don't want to do it because we just want to keep pushing it off. So we're trying to use something else to kind of take up our time and say, oh, well, I'm busy working on this thing. I can't do the thing that's kind of like tough to do, but I really need to do. I mean, we can go forever with these excuses, man. But I think the situation you're talking about is, I think that's more of a self-belief and a core belief situation, because that's another thing too. What people believe about themselves and the way people believe about themselves and what they think they're capable of or not capable of or worthy of or whatever, like these things influence the decisions you make or the decisions you don't make. The risk you take or the risk you don't take. I mean, these things, it influences, everything is influenced by what you believe you're worth, what you believe you're capable of, and what you believe that you can can tolerate as far as levels of stress or whatever. I mean, these things influence everything, every decision we make.
Yeah. Going into a different direction, as far as social circles, like today, what do you find yourself? How do you find yourself interacting with other people, or wanting to interact with other people, or not? Like as far as having social time outside of your work, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, man, I think these days I'm much more I'm much more conscious of the negativity, you know. And this isn't necessarily just about around people around me personally, like I mentioned earlier about the social media and stuff, you know, just the negativity on social media or the news or whatever it is. I try to, I understand you need to be aware of things that's going on in the world. I understand that you need to know what's happening, but I try to limit the negativity, you know. The environments that I put myself in these days, I'm much more conscious of and aware of. You know, try to put myself in environments where I can I learn from people, or learn a skill or meet new people or whatever. But I don't want to be in the environments where it what would you say, like the where I have to basically filter out what's in the environment, if that makes sense. Like for me, I don't have anything against alcohol, but these days I don't really drink a whole lot of alcohol. You know, I don't really like being around it. I don't like the environment. It's just it just almost seems like a waste of time to me, because the next day it's never worth it, and it's just the conversations that are had usually in those kind of environments. It's just like a very, I don't want to say simple, but it's just not a conversation I want to be a part of. I'm really trying to, I guess this would be the second part of that question. I'm really trying to these days put myself in environments where I'm having these kind of conversations, you know, where I'm having conversations with people who I feel like are have a lot more lessons to share with me. You know, what can I learn from? Because I'm trying to like learn from people who I feel like have maybe already been in a similar situation to me, because and I'm also too trying to put myself in the environments where I feel like I can help people that, you know, in what I've learned. So I guess these days, man, what I'm trying to do is just kind of continue to learn and continue to share and continue to be around people who, like-minded individuals is a very generic way to say it, but it's that's almost what it is, because I feel like when you're in these environments, you know, even though we're doing this virtually, when you're in these environments, man, you can learn. First of all, you can share, but you can also perpetuate your own self and like where you want to be and where you want to go. And this is the power of social media, because social media, you can talk to anybody at any time, anywhere. I can be in my house or my office or my girlfriend's house or wherever I can be. You can be wherever you're at. The next person, I mean, we can do these things. We can have these conversations. And so it's almost like if we don't want to put ourselves in the environments of those environments, it's almost like it's a choice, because even if we have like all that, we have the setup and we have the camera, we have the microphones or whatever, but you can do this with a cell phone. You know, you can jump onto a Zoom call on a cell phone, and you can be in these environments. But the other environment that I think I'm trying to be in is the comfort zone. You know, being in the ones of getting out of that comfort zone. And for me, currently, MMA, the martial arts training is a very profound, productive way to do that.
Mm-hmm. What have you found through the past 10 years running the business? What kind of wealth or financial lessons have you learned?
I've learned that I got a lot to learn. That was a big one. You know, the finances for the business was a big one, because and this is something else I talk about too, is the process. When you jump into a spot like that, where you just kind of, you know, I mean, I only worked a couple years before that, but you know, for those couple of years, having a job where presumably the company I was working for, the paycheck was guaranteed, you know, whatever, if it was however many hours it was, because I was always hourly at that point. The paycheck was going to be there. You know, I had to worry about the taxes or the equipment or whatever. I mean, it was kind of there. They just paid me, and that's what it was. But then you go into this thing where it's like everything is on you. You know, I mean, you make this money, okay, that's on the top, but then you have all these things to pay for, and so like you have to learn how to manage this. You have to learn taxes was a huge thing. The Why we are not taught taxes in high school or just general financial management, I will never understand why these things are not taught to us in high school. Because yeah, you can get an accountant or you can do whatever to have your taxes, to do your taxes, but like I think these are basic things that people need to know about. And I've talked to a couple financial advisors and managers and accountants, that kind of thing on the podcast. And it's like in most families, finances are not really discussed. And I think if there is a family where finances are discussed, I think you're already well ahead of the curve, because most families don't. I know in my household, finances were not discussed. Like we didn't, I'm saying there's an age where that's appropriate. Okay, of course I understand that, but I think that it's an important thing to learn that before you get into the adult world, and I don't know what age that is. That's different for every family, but I'm saying if you can have some sort of conversation about finances, I think it will really help be proactive to a lot of these issues that people see in their early 20s. The unnecessary debt, the unnecessary spending, the unnecessary, just trying to keep up with the Joneses and buy the $500 purse and that kind of thing, which is going around on social media these days. But it's like the finances was a huge lesson, and that's still something. Like if I had one area that I wanted to grow in right now, it's definitely that. And I don't mean just grow like I'll make more money. I mean like the financial management, because it seems like that's something that's always, especially in the last couple of years, man, with like the COVID and the inflation and all this other stuff, like that kind of stuff is always, I don't want to say changing, but it is always changing. And what you have, I've noticed that like the way I thought about it in my early 20s is very different than I think about it now. Thank God. But it's that was a really big lesson, man. And unfortunately for me, that was one of those things I had to learn by trial and error. And like I said, still not where I want to be in that area, but thankfully it's not where it used to be.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to your belief in God and your spirituality, like what is that like for you? Do you have routines? Do you what is that like?
Yeah. So, I don't really go to church. I haven't been to church in a while. No reason really. I just don't really go to church. I do pray daily. I pray, a couple times a day. I used to meditate a lot. Haven't meditated in a while. I don't claim to be, perfect at all. In fact, one of the reasons that I believe in God and that I talk and I pray I'm so dedicated to praying is because I know I'm not perfect, and I know, I can do all the personal growth that I want to do, and I can try to improve myself in all the ways that I can, but there's still going to be areas that I cannot, that I can't fix spiritually. There's going to be things that there has to be some sort of higher power or higher guidance to help with these things that really sometimes we don't have the answer for. And I mean, I know sometimes, in the space that I'm in, that I talk about, a lot of people talk about your higher self. There's a lot of belief of, that we pick our lives before we come here, from wherever we are before here. Some people believe that we pick the life we're going to live. So we know every single hardship, every single tragedy, every single pain, but we also know the reward at the end. Not saying I necessarily believe that. I mean, I think it's an intriguing concept, but whatever it is for people, man, whatever they have, whatever the higher power is that they have, I think it's important for us to have something that's guiding us, that we know that is way bigger than us, that is really at the end of the day calling the shots and making all this stuff work. Because as crazy as life can get sometimes, and sometimes it seems like it doesn't make sense, I think there's way too many things about life that are really like perfect, that if it was one thing or different, life wouldn't exist. And I think the only explanation for that is an omniscient, all-knowing creator.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as your business and your podcast, what would you want to share about those?
Yeah. So, The podcast is the Pure Wisdom Podcast. It's on all social medias. Spotify is the main platform. It's on YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. The Pure Wisdom Podcast is just how it sounds. The businessman, like I said, we're focused on a lot of commercial these days. That's the businesses, the apartment complexes, that kind of thing. We still do some residential. We have residential people that we've done. I have one person left that we've been working for 10 years. He is the only original client that we still have. There were only a couple, handful in that first year, but I don't know, people, they moved away or hired someone else or whatever. But this guy, we got one that's a veteran. He's actually a veteran. He's an ex-Marine, but he's also he's the one that we have for the last 10 years. But yeah, a lot of commercial these days is where we're focused on. So that's, like I said, the apartment complexes, the industrial kind of stuff, the commercial is where we're kind of looking.
And how can people reach you?
So the business is Absolute Landscapes LLC. That's on Facebook is our primary social platform for that. We have a website, absolute-landscapes. That's LANDSCAPES.com. The number for that is 803-427-5944. And then I'm on all social medias. My personal main platform is TikTok. As C Jones 803. That's TikTok and Instagram. And so I put a lot of inspirational, motivational clips on TikTok. The podcasts that I do, I try to cut them down in clips and put them on TikTok and that kind of thing. But yeah, so you can check me out there.
So one last question for you. What does the world need more of today?
I think the world needs more of people who believe in themselves. I think the world needs more of people who can, follow that dream or follow that goal and understand that they don't have to stay at a job that is draining their soul. They don't have to stay with that partner who is abusive and who doesn't really love them. They don't have to stay in that place this really uncomfortable for them and not fulfilling to them. I think I always say all the time on my podcast that self-awareness can eliminate or at the very least alleviate a lot of the problems that we have. But I think self-belief can really open up doors for us. And I think if every person believed in themselves and just took a chance on themselves, man, just take a chance on yourself. Because if you take a chance on yourself and it doesn't work, you're going to be in the same spot that you're already at. But if you take a chance on yourself, and I'm not saying start with something big, start something small, just something small. Tell yourself tomorrow that you're going to walk for 5 minutes before you start your day. Do something small. Take a chance on yourself, because what you'll realize when you take a chance on yourself and you prove yourself to yourself, you start to build self-confidence, and this is a snowball effect. You start with something small, okay? In a month or so, maybe you try something a little bit harder, then a little bit harder, a little bit harder. Next thing you know, 6 months into this thing, you're doing things that the person who you were 6 months ago would have been. You would have told yourself that 6 months ago, you would have laughed at yourself. But you start small, man, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed, and I understand that. You say you want to go to the gym and you want to lose 50 pounds, and I get that. That seems like a big thing, but you can't look at all 100 steps of the staircase. You have to take that first step, and what you'll probably find, regardless of what it is, if it's a business or a fitness plan or whatever, that first step is almost always the hardest. Because after you take that first step, you build self-confidence with yourself, you build a plan and a schedule with yourself, you'll find it much more easy to do the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And I think that's what the world needs more of, man, is we need more self-belief. We need more people who believe in themselves and who can give their gift to the world, which is something that only they can give.
Yeah. Well, Cody, thanks so much for joining me here and for coming on the podcast. And, in the future, let's do it again.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I definitely appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.